Welcome guys, gals and non-binary pals to this week's episode of Buffy Boys, your weekly review of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from a queer, literary and feminist perspective. My name is Joe, one of your hosts, and with me as always is the other casual host.
Brian, hi.
Brian, hi, how are you?
Fine.
Good. I'm at that point in that kind of pandemic cycle where I'm like, it's weird how we just kind of wear pajamas all the time now, or at the very least casual clothes, or at the very least comfortable clothes, and you know, I can't really envision why why the majority of the population put themselves into jeans and shoes and things and went out into the world so frequently.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's very funny, like watching people do pandemic stuff, because basically what they're experiencing is lots of working from home, which I've done for 7 years now, and lots of trying to figure out structures themselves when there's none artificially imposed upon them. So yeah, like, you know, I think I've always tended to wear sweatpants when I'm by myself during the day, working, and then before you got home, usually I would have showered and gotten into jeans and into real person clothes and stuff. And yeah, I personally see the value in like kind of getting actually dressed at some point during the day, but I think that's something that you've kind of like not really.
I find what's happening to me a couple of times, or what I'm trending towards, is I've been comfortable in work and then I put on jeans and a nicer shirt for the evening.
Yeah.
Which I can't really explain. I feel like I don't want to go straight through in the same outfit, or else I really do feel like I'm in I Am Legend or something like that.
You really love outfit changes as well. Like every so often I'll do the washing for the week and I'll find that I'll be like, this is weird. There are 14 t-shirts in here.
But I do multiple things. You know, I go outside, I go running, there's different phases to my day. Yeah.
But like, it's just, I don't understand how one person can have so many costume changes.
Well, you need to try harder, Brian.
Okay. So yeah.
Great segue.
Thanks.
So
one of the things we didn't do Bronze Bandit last week because it was the season 5 finale. Actually, we have to do.
Yeah, the introduction
stuff. Yeah, so this is season 6, episode 1, which Joel's about to say, which is Bargaining Part 1. We only watched the first half of this. The episode was aired together, parts 1 and 2. Parts 1 and 2 were written by different people, but it actually, like, even on the DVD release, I think on the airing, it probably rolled into each other with an ad break in between the end of season episode 1 and episode 2. But it's very much one packaged part, and that's the first time that's happened. Previous 2-parters, I don't think were ever aired on the same night. For example, Surprise Innocence was aired one night and then the next night because it was shifting to another time slot. But yeah, this is so it's pretty unique in that way. But we only watched the first part of the episode because we don't want to have to do more work for ourselves.
Yeah. But also, I think there's a long tradition in genre TV of treating what is essentially 2 episodes as a one evening or one bonanza television event, you know. But as you said, the Bargaining Part 1 and Bargaining Part 2 are specifically written by different people.
Yeah. So Bargaining Part 1 was released on October 2nd, 2001. So it was the second part. It was directed by David Grossman, who last directed Tough Love, and it was written by Marty Noxon, who last wrote Forever, which I can't remember which one Forever was, to be honest. But whatever. Oh, actually, no, I do. It was the one after The Body, where where Dawn tried to bring Joyce back from the dead. Mm-hmm. Okay, so here is your Buffy Ann summary. The Scoobies have fought evil all summer using the Buffy bot to hide Buffy's death from demons. A vampire damages it and reveals the truth to a demon motorcycle gang who raid Sunnydale. Giles leaves for England. Willow, Anya and Tara and Xander engage in a dark ritual to raise Buffy, which is disrupted by the demon bikers. Buffy awakes in her grave. So
succinct.
Yeah, that was reasonably useful comparatively.
We've moved to a more modern and accessible format for the Buffy Ann summary as well, one which actually parses in English. Yeah. So for our return to Bronze Banter, we've been kind of powering through a lot of fairly short form television shows recently, which has been really, really nice. I get a good dopamine from putting that strike through something on a list. But something which I think I kind of say, let's go back and have a look at this. I'm not really sure why. Is Search Party. Which we are rapidly catching up on, or we'll soon be caught up on the current release, which is season season 4. I think it will soon be caught
I
up
wouldn't
on
be
it.
surprised if we've seen caught up with it. So Search Party originally started airing in 2016, as far as I know. It is the Alia Shawkat TV show, who was Maybe from Arrested Development, and she's been in lots of things. She was in Broad City. She didn't really have a home after Arrested Development until Search Party, and she's such a talent. She's also bisexual, which is wonderful. So I love her.
I could never remember if that was true or if it was just that she really felt like she was.
She has extreme bisexual face.
She really does.
But she's wonderful. I love her, and she's incredible in this. But it's basically season 1. What the structure of the TV show is that it's a 20-minute dramedy, I want to say.
Yeah, that's very dark comedy dramedy kind of
for
thing.
sure. So and each season deals with a different like, I'm not going to say true crime, a different kind of mystery format almost. So season 1 was your Nancy Drew mysteries, like, you know, someone's gone missing and you see like whispers of them in the night. So
the premise very much being that she plays a millennial, and it's a very millennial show.
Yeah.
And one of her, she claims friends, but really just someone she kind of knew from college, seems to maybe be missing, and she wants to embroil herself in this essentially to give her a sense of direction, and kind of really evolves from there.
Yeah, season 2 is very Hitchcockian. Season 3 is like a John Grisham kind of
Legal
situation,
drama kind of thing.
and season 4 is kind of a Patty Hearst kind of thing going on there.
Yeah.
Which I think we won't go into more detail than that. But
It's a difficult show to talk about without inherent spoilers in the premise of each season.
It really builds on itself. It really escalates really beautifully. But it's a huge recommendation for me in the sense that it's very funny, very light at times, and very dark at other times. Really tautly put together, stupid and good. I really like it.
Yeah, I've been quite surprised at how much I've enjoyed it and how much I've been happy to put on the next episode for a couple of reasons. One is, and this is, I feel a terrible thing to say, and I really sound like I have a podcast when I say this, but it's one of the most authentically millennial shows I think I've ever watched.
Yeah, I think so too.
Because it's very much about people, and I'm always like, but these people seem like they're adults, and then I'm like, oh, we're adults. They're people dealing with stereotypical situation, not stereotypical, but like actual situations you might see in films or on TV, etc. And
so not actual situations then.
No,
extremely fictional situations.
No. I mean things like kidnapping, crime, lying, having to break into places, that kind of stuff you would see that, you know, does happen in the world, but you assume is fictional, and then they're like, how can we actually, as millennials, how can we react when something has actually happened?
Yeah, sure.
Like without, you know, if you see what I'm trying to get at here, it's like, for example, and this is like I don't think much of a spoiler, but at one point someone's arrested and they're in a police station for something, and they're like, I don't know any phone numbers for my call, can I see my mobile phone to get a number? And they're like, obviously not. And it's like that kind of millennial distance where it's like, oh, those things are actually things like that. There's no ease of like, but can't I just do it? You know?
Yeah, sure.
If you can kind of see what I'm getting at.
No, I do.
I kind of felt that was quite relatedly, because like, again, this is always the kind of thing that if you cut it wrong, it just comes off so hello fellow millennials, and I actually thought it was quite convincing.
Yeah, definitely youths were writing the episodes.
And yeah, it's funny, and it's like, I think a great example of how, you know, mystery, true crime, that kind of thing has been done so many times, but you can reapproach any genre with enough verve that you can actually make a new version of something, which I find quite encouraging. For
sure. We finished Atlanta over the weekend, which I had seen apparently I gave up after. I didn't give up, I didn't go back to it by accident after like season 2 episode 8, which is ridiculous.
Of 11.
And we had watched, I think, some of season 1 before, but we powered through that over the weekend as well. We won't say much about it because there's nothing to say about Atlanta. It's a masterpiece. It's incredible.
Give me a very, very brief a capsule summary for people who've never heard of Atlanta.
Donald Glover, who is Charles Gambino, who was in Community as Troy. It's his project, his TV project. It is a nightmarish comedy TV show that never or absolutely refuses to stick to any genre. Every episode is like a little masterpiece, successful or not, and it's just transcendent. It is a new form of television.
You described it as a horror TV show, and I actually think that's quite apt.
Yeah, for sure. It is definitely, there are horror elements in every aspect of it, but it's incredibly good. There's no excuse for not watching it. It's probably one of the best TV shows made in the last 20 years. It really reminds me of Master of None, but without where Master of None is very much trying to go for a romance and romance comedy kind of aspect of it. This is going for a different tone. It's incredible. There's nothing to be said about it that hasn't already been said a million times.
Also 20 to 25 minute episodes, so like much more consumable in that sense than I felt it would be.
For sure. Also very funny, well written.
Don Glover is so fucking funny. Like, he is just a funny person.
Don Glover is, I think, like, he's a genuinely incredibly talented person. But we won't say anything more about it. We watched that. It was great. We also watched, you watched, over the last couple of days, watched a bunch of the new Saved by the Bell. Yeah,
so I actually, I finished it last night and I was like, I really actually do want to talk about it. I want to recommend it because I watch a lot of like crap on my own time and stuff that you wouldn't watch with me and which I wouldn't necessarily recommend. You know, I watched 7 seasons of Voltron. I was like, I watched that, but like I wouldn't tell anyone to watch that. But I enjoyed the experience, but I didn't like it. But sometimes I have experiences like that. But Saved by the Bell, so basically, Peacock, which is what is it? NBC streaming service. I've done a revival of Saved by the Bell, which
is it NBC? Isn't NBC? I said NBC, but NBC does have a streaming service, which is what's the one that anyway, this is totally uninteresting, and I know nothing about this, so let's not pursue that line of conversation. Keep going, please.
So yes, kind of a revival or a reboot of Saved by the Bell. Now, I wouldn't necessarily see myself or expect myself to be sitting here recommending you watch the modern remake of any of those kind of shows, so obviously set up to probably be trash. And part of the reason why I'm recommending it, I think it's actually been the most successful taking of an original concept or an ogre concept, something we're very familiar with, and both reviving it but also doing it in a way that's worthwhile. You can't just restart it and have the old cast as teachers, which they do have in this, but that being the only bit about it. So some of the reasons why I think it's actually worth watching, worth trying, and which I actually massively enjoy it is, the original Saved by the Bell, we all have a lot of fond memories of it, I think, but like we watched it, it was part of the 90s, all that kind of stuff. It seems quite familiar in that way, and I myself did a deep dive on Saved by the Bell a few years ago, and it's actually like quite a terrible program insofar as like it's quite a lot of racism and sexism, misogyny, and just bizarre concepts to it, even though it's quite comfortable. It's quite a strange show. And this new show essentially sets the premise. It's the same base, like same Saved by the Bell, but there's a public school, predominantly black students who get merged with Bayside, and kind of class conflict ensues. But it sets up that Zach Morris' son is in the school. He's set up initially to seem like the viewpoint character, and it very quickly shows that one of the black students who's joining is actually the viewpoint character, and this black girl gets all the protagonist point of view. She gets all the best lines.
She gets the ability to freeze frame,
all that kind of stuff. But every episode is actually really written by people who know what they're talking about in terms of those kind of class issues, those kind of racial issues, informed by it. It's a predominantly, I would say, black show. And for the parts that I can adjacently relate to, it's like, I feel like that was well written. I feel like that landed well. The jokes are, draw on some of the Saved by the Bell tropes, but like are not kind of cheesy and uncomfortable. They're kind of like smart, like humor about it. They include a number of the old characters, but like in ways that's actually worth having them there. They have a role essentially, and we came to the culmination here, and Zach came back and it was the whole thing, and I felt the balance in the writing of this episode is just about what it's about in 2020, and it's just funny and it's just well written, with using all the parts, honouring all the parts of the characters they cooked from the old show, and kind of also pointing out that so much of it was ridiculous, and also like a lot of like Zach like drilling holes in girls' locker rooms. I mean, like Zach's actually a terrible person and that kind of stuff. But one of the reasons why I really came around to it was I found the characters very likable. Again, short, snappy, but one of the main characters is a kind of mean cheerleader character or the fashionista, the Instagram character, who turns out to actually be quite nice, is played by a young trans woman actress who has transitioned while she's been in Hollywood, and her identity is part of her character in a way that is neither kind of ignored in a way that would make it unrealistic, nor the focus of trauma or difficulty. It's just the same element of like growing up.
Yeah,
I think it's handled very, very well. But also she ends up in a relationship with one of the jock characters, one of the guys, by the end of the season, and that's just treated in a way of like, yes, this kind of, you know, young trans teen girl and this like high school football player are dating, and there's nothing more to it than that, in a way that I don't think I've ever seen on television.
Well, hilariously, like, I mean, not hilariously, appropriately for the show that like had the first interracial youth kiss, which was between Zach and Lisa Turtle in Saved by the Bell, which caused so much difficulty that the next episode after they basically got together, they completely wrote it out and forgot about it afterwards. So I mean, like, going from like, you know, no interracial couples to on the same show being like, oh, here's like, you know, like a couple with a trans woman. And like, it's very important to bear in mind, trans characters in media so excessively portrayed as sexless and undateable and you know, inclusion like elements, characters, rather than fleshed out people with genuine experiences, non-fetishized objects essentially. And like, that's so important, especially for the youth who, of course, trans youth are dating people and enjoying their life, and that should be, if you're portraying high school, especially the modern age, and like, let's be real, there's probably so many kids watching this show who just don't notice this. Don't notice that it's like an inclusion. Exactly, which is incredible. Yeah, but I can tell that her character was kind of written with some input from her, and it's the best. It really is just the best example of both, you know, specifically the trans, not issue, but the trans content. And some of the class content that I'm familiar with, of including it in a way which is not underplaying it, but is just making it a well built in part of the narrative. And then also they occasionally have jokes like, you know, we had such great times in high school, like with our friend Tori, and they're like, who the hell's Tori? Which is a callback from exactly. And then the last episode was kind of like, as they finish up, it was kind of like, you know, well, thanks, we sorted out all those issues, can't wait to just finally be a regular student at Bayside and have a casual time. Notification on the phone, coronavirus, I wonder what that is. Okay, let's go back to the max. Which kind of made me laugh. Yeah. Anyway, light, fluffy, but I was impressed, and cool. I felt like, oh, this is good that this stuff can be reclaimed in a way that's still worth making. Yeah, 100%. Okay.
So speaking of things coming back from the dead, in this episode of Buffy, we deal with the aftermath of the gifting of season 5, and we do this thing I love, which I've mentioned before, which is, it's been a summer since we've watched an episode of Buffy, you know, in the broadcast schedule, and it's also been a summer in the universe where you know, they've had 3 months of using the Buffy bot to like fill the Slayer hole in town, and kind of, you know, Anya and Xander holding off on mentioning their engagement and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it was it was an interesting episode, viewed as a half an episode. I don't think I've ever watched that episode without
just by itself.
Without watching the whole thing. So I don't think it's a really complete object in itself, even internally, structure wise. Like, it has a crescendo moment, but the crescendo comes in the middle of the story, you know. But to be concluded elsewhere.
What's funny is if it was a different TV show, you could just say that's a cliffhanger at the end of the episode, but it's actually very unusual for Buffy to roll directly into the next story in a subsequent episode, which is what demarcates as a two-parter, I think. Yeah.
I think it's worth, though, noting, just to start with, just the production elements of this episode. So we obviously have moved to UPN at this point with Buffy. They're no longer on the WB. And with that move, they actually, we'll see going forward, there's lots more gratuitous nonsense in it. So whereas previously it was hard to get a lesbian kiss onto the show, they of course imply heavily lots of lesbian cunnilingus in this season, which, you know, wonderful.
Said that in such a natural way, Brian. I was very convinced.
Which wonderful. And in this episode you see, we'll talk about this in a second, but Willow commits some like significant violence. The design of the the demons in this episode, in terms of the demon bikers, I think is a lot more gratuitous versus say your Buffy previously, though probably more in line with an Angel episode.
Yeah, I always found those bikers quite scary.
Yeah,
visually.
Me too. I think they're bad ultimately, but I think they're quite scary. Other production notes that are interesting. Joss Whedon heavily took a step back this season. Up till episode 8, he was just basically not in the writers' room because he was focusing on getting Once More Feeling ready and writing the music and writing everything about it.
Yeah, inventing a musical basically.
Yeah, it's like writing a musical is harder than writing a standard episode of anything, and like it pays off obviously. Another thing worth so yeah, he takes a step back. He was also afterwards for most of season 6 mostly unavailable because for the rest of season 6 he was also heavily involved in Firefly. So he's getting that ready. I think, you know, given the choice, if I got to write and produce for Buffy or Firefly, I think I know what I would be choosing. It's Firefly. Just kidding, I don't like Firefly.
We'll talk about that over on Firefly, fellas.
I think there's another name for that, and you know it. But so that's an interesting production note. Also worth noting is that so he didn't direct the opener or the conclusion of the season. He didn't direct the season 5 opener either. But this is the only season where he doesn't write the finale of the season. It's probably a little worse for it, I would say. And yeah, the only episode he writes and directs specifically for this season is Once More With Feeling. Joss Whedon, not a great person by all accounts. Really didn't treat a lot of his actors very well in other productions. I don't think he's ever had anything quite as brilliant as Buffy. But like his writing on Buffy is next to none. It's just stellar. So another thing worth noting is that, and Mark Fields specifically writes a lot about this, is that season 6 and 7 were previous to this, Buffy was never renewed for more than one season ahead of time. So they were always writing with the idea that like you want to have a complete story contained within this season. However, UPN ordered a 2-season deal for Buffy, and they knew that they were concluding after season 7. I have to presume they did. So season 6 and 7 feels like one continuous story in a lot of ways. Which is why season 6 has a little bit less of a conclusive moment than every other season up to this point. But yeah, it was. So it's an odd season overall.
I think it presages in the production, in the move to UPN, in that style, a lot of what we might consider much more modern television. As I think that
larger budget is a huge aspect of that. Yeah,
absolutely, and the more. Like TV simply is just a much more lucrative industry than it used to be in many ways, and much more better funded, or much better funded. So people do design stories which aren't self-contained in episodes, in seasons, in arcs, in quite the same way.
Yeah,
I think we see the herald of that in this, because as you say, even in the like everything from the filming to the special effects to the set, if not always necessarily better, they seem like bigger,
agreed,
and more in sharper focus, and you
start to see a lot more external shots in these 2 seasons, and you can usually tell that they're external shots not shot in a set, like the scene with Willow killing the fawn, because you can see there's a lot more depth of field in the background because they want to cast the background into out of focus so that you get less uncontrolled detail in your shots. So lots of interesting production notes there. One of the things that we noted, which was awful, is that we were watching the DVDs last night, and I'm in such a conundrum now because the DVD that I have, which
as soon as this happened, I was like, "This is going to be a thing we're going to talk about." We're going.
The fucking DVD just cuts at one point while Willow was killing the fawn.
Censors essentially.
It completely censors it, and I was like, "It's bizarre," because I mean, I understand that for a TV release. In fact, I know that when I watched season 6 originally, I didn't see the Warren thing, the flaying, and I was like, that's weird. I think I would have thought that would have like stood out in my memory, but it turns out that the version I was watching had cut out that scene essentially. So I'm betting that that's also been cut out in this DVD. The DVD we have is quite old, so it could be that like more modern re-releases of the DVD has that scene. I might ask Kieran, my brother, I got him a Buffy box set for Christmas, so I might ask him to check it out for me. But I'm tempted to basically to maybe go ahead and watch this season on Prime potentially, which has the HD remaster. Which, as the seasons go on, the HD remaster becomes less
of an issue.
Less of an issue for sure. The most awful seasons for were seasons 1 to 3. So be interested in that. But yeah, it cuts out that, and I bet it will cut out the flaying as well. I know that those scenes were edited out for the original broadcast, but like DVD releases, it's already 15s. Like, you're not showing, like,
you've purchased it, you should have full control over it.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of feels like probably what happened was that they just released it as was like aired. They just grabbed it from production that way. Anyway, I'm trying to think if there are any other production notes for the episode. Do you have any other, Joe?
No, nothing specific. I suppose just we have the maybe it's not so much a production note, but I think that the cast in terms of the episode is slightly restructured. I think we have kind of more prominence for Tara and Spike in terms of the ensemble and the scenes, and we have,
I think so too. Yeah.
Obviously, we have Giles being positioned to leave the show or be much less prominent in the show, or comparatively less prominent in the show, and Willow taking much more of a kind of like protagonist role in this thing. I think really anything previously
for sure. This season is, like, I think fair to say it's the most controversial season of Buffy, and one of the episodes in it is probably one of the most controversial episodes aired on TV of anything to that point, which is Seeing Red, which is the episode in which Spike attempts to sexually assault Buffy, which is like, the
locus of quite a lot of
discussion.
And,
so we'll figure that out when we get to it, and we'll make sure to give plenty of
we'll sort it
like content warnings, because why include that in Buffy? But whatever, it's fine. We'll figure it out at the time. I haven't watched it in a long time. My experience of season 6 is I probably have watched season 6 the least of any season. Because I remember whatever way I was watching it, I think it was used to be released on BBC up to season 5, and then moved to Sky One these are both UK TV series that you would get
TV channels
in Ireland, huh?
Channels,
yeah. That's a TV series, you're right. Channels that you get in Ireland. We didn't get Sky One though, so I remember like hoping to be over in someone's house when Buffy was releasing that week. And I'm not sure how, but I think by the time season 7 was coming out, we actually did have Sky, so I was able to watch season 7 as it came out. But season 6, I kind of just didn't get a chance to watch. On my original watching of the show when I was about 12. I didn't then watch it properly until maybe 2005 or so. So I think this might only be my like third time watching some of these episodes. Some of them, like Once More Feeling or Tabula Rasa and stuff, I've watched probably 4 or 5, 6. No, actually, Once More Feeling I've probably watched 15 times plus, because
you can just kind of put it on out of sequence.
People do.
I've done that. I put it on and just been like, I like the music. That was one of the first CDs I owned, was Once More Feeling. So and every time we say Once More Feeling, I hear the music start play in my head. So it's the whole thing. Yeah.
So what's your experience with season 6?
Yeah, like very, very patchy. Like I've definitely, I would be very surprised to find out there's an episode of this of season 6 or 7 that I haven't seen at some point, but I don't have a one cohesive experience of watching the season through, and I actually think this was partially around the time where I was kind of told / encouraged by my parents to like stop watching it, because like in the sense that there was more episodes that had content warnings in it, whereas like this is for mature audiences because someone gets flayed or all that kind of stuff,
or so Buffy and Spike fuck each other,
fuck the house down. So it feels slightly like as close to new Buffy as something can feel for me, which is kind of a weird thing. But no, I'm looking forward to it. I'm interested to see how I feel it fits together with the whole arc.
One of the things that people often criticize season 6 for is just being a bit grimdark, which I think it'll be interesting to watch in 2020.
How grim is it compared to like things we've seen since, if you know what I mean?
100%. I mean, like, it's not going to be Game of Thrones, and that sounds like such a ridiculous like note. Like, lol, the dark thing we can think of is Game of Thrones.
The Overton window has been pulled by stuff like that.
But Game of Thrones specifically, I'm going to highlight as darkness, because it's just endlessly and gratuitously grim, and it uses grimness as a note on a continuous basis to no effect, essentially, in my opinion. But whatever. So yeah, it'll be interesting to watch season 6. Going through it, I'm struggling to think of things to talk about this episode, because it's an odd structure for this like first first half back, you know.
Yeah. So I think one of the interesting things I'll highlight from this episode is we have a lot of focus on the use of the Buffy bot, and I find that for whatever reason, and maybe it's because around the time I watched this part of this show, and that's kind of when I last kind of like that transitional, how old would I have been then? About 12?
11,
12, yeah. Something about it made a lot of this.
Actually, okay, Joel, you had just turned 10 when this was first aired.
Oh, very good. So 10 to 11 is kind of around this time. A lot of the imagery is very like stuck in my mind, kind of dreamlike. Some of it is the idea of the Buffy bot. Buffy bot in Buffy is like this massively prominent thing for me because it just is stuck. The idea of her defending a town while Buffy isn't there. And I also, the demon bikers, I think are a real like nightmare monster for me for whatever reason. But I have a memory, this is like one night where they kind of break into a town and cause some shit, you know? But the way I've remembered this is that this period while Buffy isn't there is basically post-apocalyptic, and like for 3 months basically that the town is like, it's always nighttime and Spike is out trying to like save Dawn, and people are being pulled apart and all that kind of stuff. So I have this like persistent nightmare feel to it,
but it's only one episode really, which is the next episode. And of course that's very useful, that episode, because Buffy wakes up presuming that she's in hell because they brought hell to Sunnydale essentially, like the tearing apart of like versions of her and etc., which is why she thinks she needs to sacrifice herself again. And we'll look at that next week for sure.
But I think the inclusion of the Buffy bot is like a quite effective thing, because you don't want Sarah Michelle Gellar just not to be in
your season opener now.
The season opener. And maybe it's that I've watched so much of these kind of shows it rocks my brain, but for the entire time that the Buffy bot is there, I really wasn't thinking that Sarah Michelle Gellar was there. It's like, no, it's the actress who plays her double, the Buffy bot, and I can't quite make the cognitive link there.
Yeah, and Sarah Michelle Gellar does a great job of playing the Buffy bot.
She is, and so many people on this show are, but she is fantastic at playing alternate versions of herself. Or it's such a strength of hers.
Yeah, like we look at, she's done Buffy bot, she's done Buffy as Buffy bot, she's done Faith, and she's done
Wish vs Buffy.
She's
done Buffy when she
pre-Slayer Buffy.
She's done Buffy when she was like engaged to Spike because of a spell.
Yeah, she's done Buffy
Beer Bad Buffy. Catatonia.
Beer Bad. She's such a talent, and she's a comedic talent specifically as well as a very dramatic talent.
So we see a lot of that in this episode, and we have like the Buffy boss like trying to. They've already got this such a meta thing about the punging, by being like, stick that in your pipe plate, bingo, and it's just we haven't quite got the punging on the bot kind of down right, so I think that's quite an effective element, and I do like to see this kind of interrogation of like, how do they continue without her, and how do they continue to maintain a level of, because obviously we have the issue that Sunnydale's on a hellmouth, but like, and that Slayers generally don't have a lot of like community around them, but other Slayers have died. I often wonder like what happened to where they were based after that.
Well, presumably they send in the new Slayer, and they can't that's just not the option in this instance, because Faith is in prison. But
see, this is it, like, do they, when a Slayer dies, do they deploy a Slayer somewhere, or does the Slayer just kind of set up roughly where they are, that kind of element of it I find quite interesting.
It's hard to say, and like, I mean, there are so many places where the Slayer isn't needed. I mean, like Cleveland, for instance, or it doesn't seem like a Slayer has been in Sunnydale before anyway, and Sunnydale has been a hellmouth presumably forever, but certainly as far back as the 1912 earthquake in California, or wherever it was, which was definitely the Masters doing. It's inexplicable.
And there is canonical or adjacent stuff in the comics that suggests that Mayor Wilkins founded it. So we know in the show he did found the town. He founded Sunnydale, and that he did that. And I think it's kind of implied in season 3 as well, that because the Hellmouth was here, and because mystical energies and all that. So I think that's interesting. And also the whole thing with Giles about how this is how all Slayer and Watcher relationships end.
Yeah, that was dark.
It's quite an interesting exploration.
One of the nice things about the episode is, did you cop the title?
Bargaining as in one of the stages of grief.
Yeah, bargaining is one of the
stages. I copped that for the first time last week. Like, I mean, like in my life. I was like, oh, okay, I get that now.
And of course, bargaining as one of the stages, preceded by anger. What is it? Anger, denial, anger. Maybe it's denial, anger. But we skip those stages because they've already happened presumably over the summer. And now what the gang is doing is that bargaining stage of
literally bargaining with the god of death.
Yeah, if only I could, then maybe X, or if I'm a good person, then maybe Y. And of course, the 5 stages of grief concept has been heavily overlooked, heavily psychologically rebuked over time. Suggestions more like, the 5 stages of grief do not go in any order. There are further stages, and they tend to cycle over long periods of time, and you don't have to experience all of them.
Can I make a soapbox moment? That's a complete tangent, but I think this is a good opportunity to mention it as well. So something which I've been talking about with a lot of people in work recently and over the year, learning and development and in the pandemic and all that. So people might be similar to the concept of the 5 stages of grief and kind of the simplification of that. There's a concept of learning styles insofar as that, like, you are a visual learner, but you're not a kinetic. You're not you're not good at remembering numbers. But you can remember this, and that is widely debunked. But it's something that people really rely on. A lot. I think people in the public generally have that in their mind.
Your careers guidance counsellor in school definitely taught you that.
Yeah. So the reality is, it was never meant to be such a definitive categorization of people. And there are elements where, like, yes, some people are slightly better at some things, but everyone does all parts at all times in different ways. But because people have been very simple about it in their thinking, it has meant that people have actually been taught very badly because of it, and it's really actually been quite negative for how people learn. So it's something actually that there's a lot of, like, writing against during the pandemic, because there's all this conversation about it's really kind of limited
like kinetic learners to learn on Zoom,
but just stuff like that. Exactly. So anyway, and that's completely one of the more opinionated things I'll throw in there, but it made me, like, as in partisan opinions I have. But I just think, again, with the stages of grief, that stuff really frustrates me when people take things which are meant to be useful in context like this and then kind of just take it as a black and white, it always applies
100%.
Yeah.
At the same, I kind of see it in this instance as being reasonably similar to Freudian concepts of stuff, where it's like Freudian.
What is Freudian again?
Is it where you say one thing and mean your mother?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah. You said that last night.
Yeah, I did. That sounds awful.
No, it's because we were talking. What were we
Jeopardy.
talking
We were watching
Jeopardy.
And it was actually the night before, and someone was given a spoonerism and asked, "What is that?" And he said, "A Freudian slip." And I was like, "No, it is not." But
I always thought the Freudian was more when you say one thing, so you mean your mother. Sorry, she'll get to this episode eventually, and I'll hear about it.
It's similar to that in the sense that it can be a useful framework to understand the way psychological stuff is portrayed. Very rarely useful in practical senses, or meant to be used whole cloth. But what Mark Field suggests for the rest of the season, we'll see Buffy going through and gang going through the other stages, which is depression and finally acceptance. So that's why this is the depressed emo season.
Stage 6 being resurrection, or the kind of the unspoken 6th stage of grief. Something I like about this in terms of setting up, I think it's a nice set piece. It's like how you deal with your protagonist dying, resurrect them, but like it could so easily be that's so fundamentally could be Deus Ex Machina about that. So I like how they set it up. I like how they acknowledge, yes, Dawn tried to do this with Joyce of 4, and we had a whole conversation about how death has to be final, but this is different for a couple of reasons. One is because it's very, very difficult to do and to get the materials for it, because she was killed by mystical energy in service of the Slayer, like, lying, which is not a natural death in the order of things. So I like that world building where, like, there is a one shot chance, a legitimate reason to do this that doesn't just cheapen all the other decks on the show, and that's a delicate thing to do. I think they do it very well.
I also think it's quite smart writing, because there's been lots of debate over the years about whether or not Willow should have done this, and do you want to watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer without Buffy? And B, Willow makes a great point herself in this episode where they all presume that she's gone to hell, and they can't leave her there. Which, I buy it. I'm there. Do it. Let's keep going.
Like, it's actually 100%, because it's a classic hindsight thing, because we undermine the fact that one of the reveals and one of the twist is meant to be that she went to heaven, and that's why she's depressed.
Heaven.
Yeah. But every instinct of, like, even the concept of heaven, or not heaven, but like of a benevolent dimension, is actually kind of introduced by this season. Like,
it doesn't exist previous to this.
Yeah, we implied there's powers that be and there's potentially forces of light, but really they've very, very little to do with Buffy. So every time anyone has gone to a dimension, it's been a horrible place.
Yeah.
And specifically Angel, who was like a very strong vampire, was had to do starting Tai Chi when he came back, because he's so traumatized. So like, yeah, I actually think that, revisiting that now, like, no, I totally understand in the setting why you would do that. She couldn't possibly have known that was a bad idea. Yeah, or you could be a bad idea.
100%. Let's move on to the dusting.
Yes.
Okay, so Buffy Bits, Joel. I think I've said a lot of them in my production information. Michelle Trachtenberg, one of the shots, which is from Spiral, in her opening, in the credits, she it's flipped for some reason. Mm-hmm. It's like reversed. Who knows about that? There is also we see Alison Hannigan in the credits in place of Anthony Cedric Head in this episode, where it says, and Alison Hannigan as Willow. Tara, of course, not being in the credits yet, but she will at one point. Yeah, I mean... Oh, and... Yeah, I don't have many other, like, specifically Buffy-ish bits for this episode. Do you have any, Joe?
Yeah, so a couple of notes. One was we see that Tara and Willow have moved into the Summers household and taken over Joyce's old room. And weirdly, we saw that apparently there's a Jack and Jill door, is that what they're called, between Joyce's room and Dawn's room. So basically, you can walk directly from Dawn's room into Joyce's room. It's kind of an unusual element to it.
It is.
And yeah, so we have something which I think you pointed out before, which is that one of the fundamental shocks in the credits now for season 6, the last shot of Buffy kind of being defiant, it's actually of the Buffy bot from the gift.
I'm pretty sure this for the rest of the show, it's like the final shot of the credits is the Buffy bot rather than Buffy. Yeah,
absolutely. A couple of other just notes from the show that I don't want to miss as we exit. One is that the scene of Dawn climbing into bed with the Buffy bot to sleep beside her is very heartbreaking. But also Anya saying that one of the things she did as a vengeance game was make people fill out spreadsheets for all eternity, which I thought was quite funny.
You would love that.
Like, yeah, we all have our different hells, I suppose. Yeah. Am I in it?
Okay, and some fashion notes. I quite like Buffy Bot's red leather jacket. I do not like the demon or vampire content or visual stylings throughout the episode. It's kind of gross. No. One of the vampires at the beginning of the episode is wearing a metal studded like gauntlets. And they look bizarre and funny. I quite like the flowy dress on the flowy flowery dress that Buffy's wearing. The Buffy Bot is wearing when they go to the parent teacher conference or parent-teacher meetings for Dawn, where Buffy apparently says the right thing by being an automaton, which is great. And in that, actually, a Buffy bit for you. There's a black woman in the parent-teacher conference, a teacher, and I was like, that's weird because this show does not like putting black people in it.
Yeah, or really, like, I think definitely given the context, the lack of a black cast member is particularly notable. But generally, I think it's fair to say that almost like it's notable whenever there's any non-white actors in the show of any
100%
of any context.
Thankfully, Principal Woods is in the next season. But like literally the only black character in this show of note. It's the
only like main cast / recurring, whatever you want to call that categorization of cast. Absolutely.
Honestly, like such an oversight. Like how thank God you couldn't get away with that in this day and age. Like bizarre. There is and just like the bikers look bizarre. They're all wearing like piercings in really gross places, like on their necks and stuff, and they all have
Cenobite.
Yeah, they're very Cenobite. That's my note too. And then I also thought it was really weird to see Willow in a completely white dress when she's sacrificing the fawn, but of course that is then stained with the blood of the fawn, which very much represents innocence and
the wine of the mother.
Yeah, and Willow losing innocence in trying to do this all, etc.
We should probably note as well that as one of Jaws' going away presents, Tara gives him a little toy monster from the gas station and says, Grr, arg, which is obviously a reference to the Mutant Enemy production company.
Do you have any fashion notes, Joe?
Fashion notes. Otherwise than that, no. I would say that
Sanders' haircut is better.
Sanger's haircut was much better. I think there was someone else who got a haircut as well. Everyone's looking well. Everyone's looking well.
More
so
modern,
far.
for
more,
sure.
More modern, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, Joel, do you have a death count for us?
I do. So we have one vampire immolated by Spike, with his cool cigarette lighter. One vampire dusted by Buffy. One vampire whose head is torn off by the demon who's apparently called Razor, and one Fong ritually sacrificed by Willow. And I would note a rare addendum for this show: one person undeathed, which is Buffy Summers.
Yeah, true.
Third time's the charm, eh, Buffy?
What's your rating, Joel?
What's my rating? Probably give this episode a 8.3. 8.3. Psychic GPS is. I think it's perfectly fine as an opener. I like so far all the elements they've introduced for season 6. I think the ensemble acting is really, really strong in it, and I find some of the just lore elements really compelling, but like perfectly fine. Yeah.
I'm going to give it 8.0 underskin scarabs out of 10.
Gross.
Because Willow has a bunch of scarabs under her skin, and I forgot to note down a specific phrase. Yeah, it was good. It was a grand season opener. It's not one of the stronger ones. It's not one of the weaker ones either. And I'm excited to see how the season goes. I think it really does need to be taken as a 2-parter. I'm fine with it. I don't have any. I'm not angry with the episode, certainly. Also, the most watched episode of Buffy since Innocence, maybe more than Innocence even. So yeah, that's pretty interesting too.
Very good.
Okay, do you want to move on to Cordelia Chase there, Joel?
Yeah, so over on the Cordelia Chase, we're opening season 3 of Angel with an episode called Heartthrob.
Quite liked it.
Yeah, so the framing narrative for it, or the structure the episode hangs on, is that off screen back in the Whirlwind days with Drew and Spike and Daryl and all that, Spike also had Angel also had 2 other vampires they travelled with, who were a man called James and a woman who I believe was called Victoria. Elizabeth.
Okay, cool.
Let's say it's Elizabeth. 2 vampires who are in love with each other, and Angel stakes Elizabeth in the modern day, which causes his old vampiring companion James to track him down, and in doing so has an experimental procedure where he has his vampire heart removed, which means he will die in 6 hours, but before that can't be staked and can't be burnt or anything like that. So that's really those scenes are kind of unnoticeable, really, but it's a framework by which to examine the fact that Angel has come back from kind of 3 months, I believe it was in Tibet, trying to deal with Buffy's death, Fred trying to acclimatise herself after coming back from Pylea, and the other 3, the gang, once again trying to fill that kind of hole, but actually been much better, I think, this time than any previous occasion at being a good demon hunting crew and being cohesive and all of that. And running underneath that, we have kind of Angel trying to, reacclimatize himself and try to deal with the reflection and counterpoint in James of how he's dealt with the woman he loves dying compared to how James did, and whether he actually love Buffy enough if he's still here, and if he can
why didn't they kill him?
Why didn't they kill him? Why didn't it kill him? But then alongside that, we also have this kind of developing issue with Cordelia, where which is setting up some of the arc for the season, which is that her demonic visions are really physically hurting her. Yeah. And she wants to have this burden, this responsibility to help people, but and we'll see as the episode's gone, she physically starts to actually manifest signs of the attacks and all this kind of stuff. So it gets really kind of traumatic for her. We do have more trauma for her in this episode. We're really getting into this repeated thing of she just gets pushed down and beaten up and cut and kidnapped and etc., which is not great. But yeah, overall I enjoyed it. I thought that the banter was good. The cast dynamics between the crew were really, really strong. We also have, as part of those flashbacks with James, we kind of really firmly introduce the vampire hunter Holtz, who's been hunting Angel, hunting him in the old days, and comes forward into the modern day to hunt him as well because he killed his family. So there's a lot of there's good thematic threads here that they build on for the season, and which hang together better than maybe some of the other threads had previously. And then we have a classic soap opera twist at the end of the episode where we see Darla is still alive out there in the world and is pregnant with a vampire baby.
Yeah, pretty good.
So yeah, overall I'd say probably a solid 8. 8 failed feminist gestures. Yeah,
I was thinking the same. I thought specifically the Monster of the Week content not up to much, but the writing overall hugely improved. The performances were much less wooden. The whole thing felt a lot more comfortable. I have very fond memories of season 3 of Angel. So I'm excited to continue on with that. I'm not looking forward to season 4 with all the Connor content. But season 3, I think really the heyday for Angel, along with season 5, I think is also quite good, really.
Yeah, so we've talked about how the strong seasons for Angel, like season 3 is probably the height. Season 2 has some good elements to it, while uneven places. Season 1, people are quite fond of, even though it is so prototypical, just because it's the premise as the first season. And season 5 is the most modern season of Buffy or Angel, and it does a victory lap and has some fun elements to it. And season 4 is like a really difficult watch, a difficult season of just television. But we'll find our own way through that. But yeah, this is like a good point for Angel.
Yeah, I quite enjoy this episode, and I'm actually quite looking forward to watching Angel this season.
Yeah.
Just the Wesley Angel
betrayal
split.
Arc, yeah,
great, love it, so dramatic. Okay, let's wrap it up for the week then.
Absolutely. So folks, thanks so much for joining us. If it's your first episode starting of season 6, that's an interesting choice, but we hope you're happy to be here, and there's loads for you to go back to listen to if you want to as well. If you've been with us the whole part of the way, thanks for keeping on with us here on Buffy Boys.
And you know what, Ian Carlos Crawford, who we
friend of the podcast,
who we had a really great episode with a couple of like a year and a half ago now. Actually, it was like this November.
It's only a year and a half ago. Jesus Christ! Jesus.
Yeah. Anyway, great guy Ian, and recently shouted us out in his Instagram story saying that we were the Buffy podcast he listens to the most, which was really nice of him and caused about like a 50% increase in our Instagram followers. Yeah,
and I suppose for context, he is the host of Slayerfest 98.
He's the host of Slayerfest 98.
Our sister podcast.
He's interviewed like every Buffy person. I'm so envious. He knows them all. He has
spoken to Charisma Carpenter, which is
God. Imagine being touched by an angel like that.
Yeah. Speaking about being touched by an angel next week on. Let's wrap it up there. If you enjoyed this episode and if you're enjoying Buffy Boys, please let us know. Tell your friends and tell your demon bikers.
Oh, Joel.
I was going to say your resurrected dead friends, and I was like, that's maybe not where I want to go with that.
No.
Tell everyone. We will see you next time, but hopefully not, actually. Hopefully we won't see you. You'll hear us next time on Buffy Boys.
Yeah, we'll see you there. It's on.